Draven, the young master of the Beijing Circle, intercepted a plane in order to win back his girlfriend. Their love affair caused a sensation across the entire internet, but no one knew that the plane was also carrying the transplanted organ that my sister urgently needed for her surgery. The kidney source that we had been raiding for several years was completely ruined. After learning about it, my sister directly jumped off the top floor of the hospital. The following year, I became Draven's personal secretary. The news of Siren's return to the country was extremely eye-catching. After all, Draven had intercepted a plane for her back then, and the passionate love story between the two of them was known to almost everyone. I glanced at the live broadcast screen of the entertainment channel on the TV and continued to focus on tying Draven's tie attentively. Siren's plane will land at 10 o'clock. It's just right for you to set off in 10 minutes. Siren likes red roses. I've already sent someone to order a bouquet of flowers and have them delivered to the car. I've reserved a table at the restaurant for you at 11:30. The address has been sent to the driver. I reported to him in an orderly manner, with a calm voice. You don't seem to be jealous at all, Draven said with a light laugh, his tone a bit cold. By the way, President Draven, this is the hotel room key. Please keep it. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I took a respectful step backward. The air was quiet for a few seconds. Draven suddenly grabbed my chin and forced me to look up at him. Nebula, you're really something. The moment I raised my head, crystal clear tears slid down my face. My eyes were red, but I bit my lips tightly and didn't make a single sound of crying. Looking stubborn and broken. His angry questioning got stuck in his throat, and his expression froze. Nebula. There was a bit more pity in Draven's tone as he called my name in a hoarse voice. As if I had endured to the limit. I sobbed and threw myself into his arms. And incidentally smudged my lipstick onto his shirt. Draven. Do you really have to torture me like this? You clearly know that I care about you. Yet you still say such things to misunderstand me. I'm so miserable that I'm almost going crazy. But I have to pretend not to care. A struggle flashed in Draven's eyes. And finally, he hugged me with a look of guilt. Although Draven had intercepted the plane back then, Siren still insisted on leaving. They made an agreement that they would get engaged when Siren returned to the country. But for a playboy like Draven who was used to being carefree, how could he possibly endure it for 3 years? So I took advantage of the situation and approached Draven by taking advantage of my position. I would stay up all night to accompany him when he was sick. And I would also drink for him until I had a gastric hemorrhage when he was doing business negotiations. Siren was notoriously spoiled and arrogant. During their passionate love period, Draven thought she was straightforward and cute, and regarded all her unreasonable acts as a special kind of charm. But as time went by, coupled with the time difference between the two countries, Draven also began to feel tired. So, he quickly fell into my gentle trap. I often showed my infatuation to him. Yet I always maintained a distance when he was most into me. Just like what happened just now. Or like the situation at this moment. It doesn't matter. As long as I can stay by your side, I don't care about anything else. I smiled sadly, but still obediently handed him his coat. Go quickly. It's already getting late. Draven looked at his watch. And his expression changed slightly. Be good. Wait for me to come back. Okay. I watched him leave in a hurry and hooked the corners of my lips expressionlessly. Just being late is enough to make Siren furious. I wonder how wonderful her expression will be when she discovers the lipstick mark. It's really something to look forward to. When I was 14 years old, I had my first period. The medical conditions in the countryside were backward, and there was no physiology class in the school which only had one teacher. I was so scared that I burst into tears, thinking I had a terminal illness. My sister came over when she heard my crying and hugged me tightly in her arms to comfort me. Nebula. This is normal. It's not a disease. My sister was the only college student in the village. And she was going to report to the school after the summer vacation. She knew a lot of knowledge and never lied, so I immediately stopped sobbing. Since my sister said it was okay, it must be okay. But I don't know why. My sister's expression became more and more solemn. That night, there was a fierce quarrel at home. My sister cried brokenly, and sat under the desk clamp holding her admission notice all night. The next day, she told me, "Sister is getting married next month. You have to take good care of yourself at home from now on." I looked at her sad eyes and asked in confusion, "And you're not going to college?" My sister was silent for a long time and then smiled and said, "Yes. I'm not going." But as she smiled, countless tears fell from her eyes again. Later, I found out that my father had caused trouble while drunk and had injured the village head's son. After the village head's son was rescued, he became a fool, and the promised daughter-in-law also ran away. My father was afraid of going to jail and promised to marry me off to the village head's family. After my sister learned about it, she chose to take my place. Since then, my sister not only had to serve her in-laws but also worked 3 jobs a day to buy medicine for the fool. Overwork caused her to suffer from uremia at a young age. But not only was the village head unwilling to treat my sister's illness, but he also drove her out. At that time, I was in the middle of preparing for the college entrance examination. She was worried about my studies and didn't reveal a single word about her situation. When I saw her in the hospital, she had already become as thin as a skeleton. Even so, she was still planning for my future. "Take this card. All the money for your dowry that I saved for you is in it. In the future, your husband's family won't dare to look down on you. Don't waste money on treating my illness. It's too expensive." I sat in the corridor of the hospital and cried all night. The next day, I went to apply for a loan. My sister finally agreed to receive active treatment after I persuaded her. We persisted for a year, and the hospital finally found a matched kidney source. Just when I thought everything was starting to get better, fate played a huge joke on us. After having a big quarrel with Draven, Siren decided to go abroad, in order to win back his girlfriend. Draven directly intercepted the plane. For a while, the love between him and Siren caused a sensation across the entire internet. Netizens sighed over Draven's deep affection, and countless girls envied them. But no one knew that the plane was also carrying the transplanted orb and that my sister urgently needed for her surgery. The kidney source that we had been waiting for several years was raw, and because it had passed the preservation time, this meant that the hope of survival was completely shattered. And all the time, money, and the pain and suffering from the illness that we had endured over the years were all in vain. After my sister learned about it, she completely broke down and directly jumped off the top floor of the hospital. Her thin body, as thin as a piece of paper, was smashed to a bloody mess. I looked at the blood on the ground and couldn't imagine how much pain my sister had endured at that time. The airline gave the reason that the weather had suddenly changed, but I knew that this was just an excuse for Draven. I went crazy looking for Draven to seek justice, but I was thrown out by the security guards before I even stepped into the company gate. Not willing to give up, I instead accused the 2 of them of their actions on the internet. Siren then bought a large number of online trolls to attack my Weibo and led her fans to carry out cyberbullying against me. During that period, whenever I went out, I would be followed and beaten up. Every day, every day. Siren's fanatics would splash red paint and throw rotten eggs at my doorstep. The double torture of my body and mind almost made me collapse. Later, Draven sent a lawyer to negotiate with me. There was no compensation and no apology in the settlement agreement. Only blatant threats. The lawyer looked at me with a sneer, his eyes full of contempt. "It was just an accident. This is a very normal thing. Just like you, Nebula. When you go out, there's also a certain probability that you'll encounter a car accident." Late at night, I received a call from Draven. "Siren has a stomachache. Come over and cook some porridge for her." Before I could answer, Siren's hypocritical voice came true. "Nebula, I heard abroad that you, as a secretary, have taken good care of my Draven. I also want to taste your cooking skills." Not asking the nanny to cook the porridge, but going to the trouble of calling me over to serve her was nothing more than an attempt to humiliate me. This kind of clumsy trick, Draven couldn't possibly not be able to tell. It seems that he's not fully attracted to me yet. Then I'll add more fuel to the fire. "No problem. I'll come right away." I smiled and did my makeup and styling while answering. So when Draven opened the door, he saw me looking pale and pitiful. I stroked my semi-wet long hair and said in a low voice, It's not easy to get a taxi at night. So I had to walk here in the rain. Go to the bathroom first. Don't catch a cold. Draven frowned, and his words were interrupted by Siren halfway through. Can't Secretary John cook the porridge and then go home to take a shower? Do I have to wait for her? Siren gave me a fierce glare. Then go quickly. Don't let Siren starve. Draven immediately changed his attitude and held Siren's hand to soothe her. But I knew that the concern he had inadvertently shown just now was enough to make Siren feel jealous. Yes. I followed step by step and went to the kitchen. When I broke the 5th plate, Siren rushed in and slapped me. You can't even do such a simple thing well. Are you deliberately trying to annoy me? Sorry. I'm not very good at cooking. Get out. Draven just sat in the living room and watched, not coming in to stop it, although he felt a bit reluctant. After all, Siren's emotions were the most important thing in his heart. There were tears in my eyes. And I left him with a thin and desolate back. When putting on my shoes, my hand holding the door frame was shaking violently. My originally fair skin was covered with blood blisters burned by the casserole. A wound cut by a piece of porcelain was still oozing blood. The moment I closed the door, I heard Siren's sharp roar. What are you looking at? She's already gone. Are you still reluctant to part with her? If you want to vent your anger, I didn't stop you. If you want to hit her, I didn't say anything either. What else do you want? Did I say something wrong? Your eyes are almost glued to her body. You're simply unreasonable. Draven's tired sigh came. I hooked the corners of my lips with a very good mood. In contrast, he should especially miss my thoughtfulness and understanding now. Right? I walked very slowly, making sure that Draven could see me from the huge French window in the living room. A Cayenne stopped in front of me. And the car window slowly rolled down. Nebula. Did you call me here in the middle of the night, just to be your driver? Orion frowned slightly. And there was a bit of a ripple on his usually indifferent face. He is Draven's older brother. An illegitimate son of the Draven family. After Draven had a falling out with his family because of Siren back then, he was brought back to the Draven family. Of course not. I smiled charmingly and got into the passenger seat. You'd better really have something important. As soon as Orion finished speaking, the door of the Cayenne was suddenly kicked so hard that it made a huge noise. I glanced at Draven's livid face and blinked. Look, here comes the situation. Orion smiled faintly for a moment, as if he was a bit helpless. Tell me, how should we act? I lowered my voice, rubbed my eyes until they were red, and gave him a sly smile. Just act naturally. I opened the car door and grabbed Draven's clothes hem in a panic. Draven. Why are you here? Draven's eyes were full of anger. He hugged me with one hand and pointed at Orion's nose with the other. Why are you here? What do you want to do? Orion slowly parted his lips, and his slender fingers tapped gently on the steering wheel. I'm just passing by. I saw this beautiful lady and thought she was really pitiful. So I wanted to send her home. She's mine. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Same-sex competition often stirs up a man's possessiveness even more. Draven hugged me tighter, and his tone became more fierce. Yours. Then what is Siren? Orion didn't care about Draven's emotions at all, and his tone was teasing. Draven was left speechless by him and couldn't answer for a moment. Orion stared straight at me, his eyes full of aggression. Beautiful lady. You might as well follow me. It's better than being with him without a proper status. As he spoke, my face gradually turned pale. I seemed to have lost my soul. And I looked up at Draven with a tremor. Mumbling. Draven was filled with anger and slammed the car door shut. Get lost. You a bastard. Don't deserve to try to steal my woman. Orion shrugged inferiorly and stepped on the gas pedal. There was a deliberate roar. And before leaving, Orion didn't forget to blow me a kiss. Looking like a carefree playboy. Hey, heaven fulfilled my intercession. Beautiful lady. Give me a call when you've made up your mind. Draven lifted my face. And there was a surge of love and pity in his eyes. Nebula. Don't listen to his attempts to drive a wedge between us. He just wants to make me unhappy. I'll treat you well. Even if Siren comes back, I will never abandon you. Yeah. I know. I lowered my eyes and, as if unintentionally, rubbed the wound on my skin. Draven was silent for 2 seconds. And it seemed that he also realized that his promise wasn't very convincing. Sensing his restlessness, I gave him a cute smile at the right moment. Draven, Kevin Salselv Maid Sai. I trust you. Really? Draven looked a bit stunned. As if he didn't expect me to be so easily placated. Watching the guilt in his eyes deepen little by little, I continued. Even if you're lying to me, I'm willing to believe that you have your own helpless reasons. Draven exhaled a long breath. And his expression was touched. I took the initiative to hug him and buried my head in his chest. Draven stroked the top of my head and said softly. I wish she were as good as you. I bit my lip hard to hold back my laughter. It turned out that their earth-shattering love was just so-so. The next day, the gossip about Draven having a tryst with his lover spread like wildfire throughout the city. Reporters took photos of Draven taking me home. In the photos, it showed my blurry back and Draven's clear face. With Draven's sponsorship over the years, Siren has obtained a lot of resources and is now a rising first-tier actress. Sharp-eyed netizens quickly noticed that the girl in the photo wasn't Siren. In an instant, the public opinion turned around, and the topic speculating that Siren had been cheated on topped the trending searches. Siren's fans publicly boycotted Hom Corporation's products and cursed Draven as a scumbag. The CP fans couldn't accept the downfall of the perfect couple, and vented all their emotions on Hom Corporation's official Weibo account. What should we do? I browsed through the large number of intense comments in the comment section and looked at Draven uneasily. In just an hour, the phone in Draven's office had been ringing off the hook. Affected by the negative news, Hom Corporation's stock price plummeted, and its reputation was in jeopardy. It's okay. Draven rubbed the center of his brows and tried to maintain his composure. How about I make a public statement to explain that I seduced you? Will public opinion be more favorable to you then? I shed a few tears and closed my eyes as if I were facing death. Silly girl. Why do you always think of me? Aren't you afraid of being cyberbullied? Draven was extremely touched and opened his arms to me. I hugged him tightly. My voice muffled. I don't care. I'm really worried about you. The tenderness in Draven's eyes was overwhelming. And he lowered his head to kiss me. Just as our lips were about to touch, Siren suddenly pushed open the door of the office. I hurriedly broke free from Draven's embrace. And my guilty look unconsciously made the situation seem even worse. Siren was stunned for a few seconds and then started crying and shouting hysterically. Draven! You really have an affair with her. What did you promise me back then? It hasn't been long. And you're already cheating. If it weren't for you, why would I have given up the opportunity to develop abroad? Draven looked a bit flustered and stood up to grab Siren's shoulders. Please calm down. These words were like adding fuel to the fire. Siren means pounded hard Draven's chest with her chain bag. How can you expect me to calm down? After all, Draven was in the wrong in this matter. So he patiently comforted her in a gentle voice. You haven't been by my side all these years. And I've been really lonely. It's my fault. I won't make such a mistake again in the future. Siren. Please don't be angry with me. Okay? Siren's chest heaved violently. And she turned her head to stare at me fiercely. As if she wanted to bore 2 holes in me. It's you. You seduced Draven. Didn't you? Bitch. You're such a bitch. Draven. Fire her immediately and make public the fact that she seduced you. I was like a frightened little rabbit, cowering behind Draven in confusion. Draven instinctively protected me. Looking a bit hesitant. I'll handle this matter well. Don't worry about it. Siren, whose emotions had just stabilized a bit, suddenly flew into a rage and made a move to slap me. You still want to hide your mistress away, don't you? I can see that you're reluctant to part with her. I don't care. You must ruin her reputation. Also, how's Infiltrating Beijing? You must give me those new endorsements from the C family. Or I won't let you off. Siren was used to being pampered. Now that she felt wronged, she threw a tantrum without caring about the situation. But she forgot that this was the most difficult time for Hom Corporation, and also the most challenging moment for Draven. Back then, when he insisted on marrying Siren, he had already offended the elders in his family. Over the years, The group hadn't made much progress under his management, and many shareholders were questioning Draven's ability. In order to convince the public, Draven's family had withdrawn a lot of his powers. Now, Draven's personal life issues had affected the group's interests, and his position as the heir was in jeopardy. What's more, Siren was still threatening and demanding without considering the situation. His already tense nerves reached the limit, and Draven gave her a cold look for the first time. Siren, can you stop making a scene? Nebula knows how to think of me. But as my girlfriend, you're throwing a tantrum at this moment. Siren's eyes immediately turned red, and she choked in disbelief. You think I'm not as good as her, don't you? Siren held back her tears, looking pitiful, stubborn, and proud, which was really endearing. After all, she had sacrificed so much in the past, and finally, he softened his heart towards Siren. Looking at Draven's wavering expression, I sneered in my heart. The good show has just begun. So I shrank back and turned my face away, just right to reveal the faint hickeys on the side of my neck. Siren, who had just calmed down a bit, lost her mind again and pounced on me like a shrew. I didn't dodge and let her pull my hair and throw me aside. Seizing the right moment, I used the force to crash into the corner of the table. In Siren's horrified eyes, I slumped to the ground with my eyes glazed over, and a pool of blood slowly seeped out beneath me. Nebula. Draven was terrified and hastily helped me out. The baby. My baby. I trembled and pulled Draven's hand to my belly, sobbing in despair. What? Nebula. Are you pregnant? Surprise flashed in Draven's eyes, and he immediately picked me up and rushed outside. Draven, Wavenel. She's faking it. I didn't use that much force at all. She deliberately held onto my hand. Siren panicked and quickly blocked Draven. Get out of the way. Upon hearing this, Siren burst into tears, her face turning pale. But this time, Draven didn't even spare her a glance. In the intensive care unit, I opened my eyes weakly. The moment my eyes met Siren's, I curled up and shrank back like a conditioned reflex. The mean's heartache in Draven's eyes overflowed immediately. He held my hand and soothed me softly. Nebula. Don't be afraid. I'll stay with you. The doctor has already examined you, and now all your indicators are stable. I looked at Draven cautiously and hesitated. What about my baby? We will have another baby. My dear. Draven forced a smile, suppressing his pain. I froze on the hospital bed, crying and laughing at the same time. How could this happen? How could my baby be gone? Draven. Are you lying to me? This joke isn't funny at all. I wanted to give you a surprise. I was about to have a baby. Draven quickly wiped away my tears and held me in his arms. Looking at Draven's attentive care for me, Siren gritted her teeth in jealousy. Nebula. How long are you going to keep pretending? I think you're the one who caused the miscarriage. And now you're trying to frame me. Draven, Raven. Don't be deceived by her innocent appearance. Draven gave a fierce shout and signaled the bodyguards to throw Siren out. Enough. Nebula just lost her baby. How can you still accuse her like this? It was you who attacked Nebula and caused her to miscarry. I saw it with my own eyes. I never thought you could be so vicious. And now you still dare to quibble. I knew that Draven had always wanted a child. But Siren had always refused to have a baby in order to maintain her figure. I think this was one of the reasons why Draven accepted me so quickly. The old man of the Draven family is in worse and worse health now, and his only hope is to have a grandson. Draven's position in the group is now precarious, and he has lost the support of the people. He doesn't have a great advantage in competing for the inheritance. But if he can have the eldest grandson, he will have a chance to regain the old man's favor. But now, Siren has Rue and all of this. The argument in the office also made Draven see Siren's true character clearly. Whether in terms of interests or feelings, Siren has let him down. Once a crack appears in the heart, it will only grow wider and wider. I buried my face in the quilt and smiled with satisfaction. Nebula. Is there anywhere else that hurts? Draven asked worriedly and carefully tucked in the corner of the quilt for me. Draven. Let's break up. What are you talking about? Nebula. I didn't protect you well this time. But I will never let Siren hurt you again. Draven became emotional all of a sudden and refused to agree no matter what. It seems that he has really fallen in love with me. But I'm really scared. Siren has your support and her family to pave the way for her. But I have nothing. I've already lost a baby. And I really can't imagine how much more coercion I'll have to endure in the future. I cried pitifully. Like a daughter flower with nowhere to cling to in the wind and rain. Nebula. I will protect you. I don't believe you anymore. Didn't I just have a miscarriage after being beaten by Siren right in front of you? Then tell me. What do you want? If you really love me, you have to give me real guarantees. Okay. I'll ask someone to take care of it right away. Draven let out a barely perceptible sigh. After all, he couldn't bear to stimulate me anymore. Draven. You can go. Let me be alone for a while. I played the role of the tragic figure with due diligence. Then you have a good rest. After much hesitation, Draven left with a heart full of guilt. Listening to the footsteps gradually fading away, I got up and called Orion. In the dead of night, the door of the hospital ward was opened again. I waved the share transfer agreement in my hand at Orion and raised my eyebrows triumphantly. Orion looked at me for a few seconds. And a soft laugh escaped from his throat. Good acting skills. I'm flattered. I still want to thank President Draven for his cooperation. In fact, I wasn't pregnant at all. I just stuffed a blood pack in my stomach in advance. As for the examination results, this private hospital had long been completely under Orion's control, and it was easy to change a medical record. He actually trusts you so much. Orion flipped through the contract, his voice tinged with a smile. On the one hand, my wholehearted dedication before has made him let down his guard. Besides, he's always been arrogant enough and truly believes that a woman like me, who is obsessed with love, can't stir up any trouble. Draven allocated 3 of the shares to me. And Orion had been secretly wooing the senior management to acquire scattered shares. With the shares in my hand, plus the 18 he originally had, Orion was now the largest shareholder of the Han Corporation. It's time to close the net. Orion handed me a USB drive, his expression somber. Although he had the equity in hand, Draven was after all the legitimate bloodline of the Draven family and wouldn't be easily abandoned. Unless he committed an unforgivable mistake that would make the Draven family completely lose hope in him. Coincidentally, Draven would represent the Han Corporation to participate in a crucial bidding next month. And that would be the best time for us to take action. Replace Draven's plan and don't leave any traces. Understood. After it's done, I'll cover all your expenses for studying abroad, and you can also make any other wish to me. I smiled. I had no reason to refuse the opportunity that came to me. Is what President Draven said true? Of course. Then what if I say I want to be the only lover of President Draven? I put away my innocent and pure disguise and looked straight into his deep eyes. There was a hint of interest in Orion's gaze as he looked at me. Why don't you just say you want to be my girlfriend? President Draven. I know my place. Is that so? He raised his hand and pinched my chin, chuckling softly for a moment. So will President Draven agree? I raised my head fearlessly, straightened my back, and smiled charmingly. When everything is settled, I will have a new beginning. I will climb up with double the effort, carrying my sister's share. My sister once said that she hoped all the girls in the countryside could get into university and not be trapped in a bad marriage for a lifetime. To achieve this vision, a lot of money and a high social status are needed, and Orion will be my best stepping stone. I promise you. Orion pressed a kiss on the corner of my lips, and there were some emotions in his eyes that I couldn't distinguish. I was startled by his sudden intimacy and stared at him blankly. What's wrong? Are you shy, my lover? Orion's eyes were bold, and his tone was casual and flirtatious. The last 2 words were deliberately emphasized and drawn out, sounding particularly tender. For no reason, the tips of my ears turned red, and I bluffed in a show of bravado. Not at all. Is that so? Then have another kiss. Orion smiled wickedly and pinched the soft flesh on the side of my face calmly. This time I couldn't respond, and I could only glare at him angrily. Go away. Yes, how the my lover. These days, Under the pretext of recuperating from my illness, I moved into Draven's private apartment. Every night, I would wake up in a cold sweat and sob softly under the covers. Draven's love and pity for me grew stronger, and he even indulged me to come in and out of his study. I held a ball of blanket and stood pitifully at the door. Draven, I had another nightmare. Will you stay with me? Draven's gaze lingered on the computer desktop for a few seconds, and he pressed the mute button. What did you dream about? Crystal clear tears streamed down my cheeks, and I closed my eyes in pain. I dreamed of a little boy calling me mom. But just as I was about to hug him, he turned into a pool of blood. Draven beckoned to me, and a trace of pity flashed in his eyes. The surgeon, under Orion's instruction, specifically told Draven that the fetus I miscarried was a fully formed male baby. At that time, he stood there in a daze for a long time, with a complicated expression. Come here and let me hug you. I obediently lay on his lap, feigning sleep, and the voice recorder in my pocket recorded every word of his internal bidding meeting. When the meeting ended, I pretended to be unable to breathe and moaned, Draven, my stomach hurt so much. Without thinking, Draven rushed out to find the family doctor. I leaned weakly against the desk and quietly inserted the USB drive. Codes moving at a high frequency quickly appeared on the computer screen. The hacker hired by Draven remotely took control of the computer. On the day of the bidding, Draven and I attended in splendid attire. He got rid of the depression of these past few days and was full of spirit. Nebula, thank you for staying with me all these years. When I make a complete comeback, I will definitely give you a proper status. I bribed Siren's assistant and instructed her to spread rumors in Siren's crew that I was about to take her place, along with many intimate photos of me and Draven. Siren was already annoyed after being plotted against by me last time. Now, stimulated by this, she, as always, couldn't keep her cool and repeatedly sought Draven to vent her emotions. Compared with my uncomplaining dedication and bottomless tolerance, Siren's behavior completely annoyed Draven. In a fit of rage, Siren spoke without thinking and threat and to expose all of Draven's shameful deeds. Draven was used to being high and meaty and hated being manipulated the most. What's more, it was the woman he once doted on the most who was repaying his kindness with enmity. He completely lost his affection for Siren and proposed to break up. Okay. I smiled brightly, sincerely looking forward to the upcoming show. Draven adjusted his suit and confidently stepped onto the stage to open the PPT. But after reading just 2 words, he stopped awkwardly. He realized that the file had been replaced. But in such an occasion, Draven admitted that he had made such a low-level mistake, whole mistake. It would be tantamount to admitting his incompetence. A rustling of whispers arose from the audience, and the old Master Han's face turned blooded. Amid the surprised gazes of everyone, Orion calmly stepped forward and took the microphone. It seems that my younger brother isn't ready yet. How about I introduce my plan to everyone first? After the words fell, without waiting for Draven's reply, Orion started his speech directly. Draven blushed with embarrassment and shrank into the corner, caught in a dilemma. In the contrast, the difference in their abilities was immediately apparent. The old Master Han looked at Orion with approval in his eyes. When Orion received the thunderous applause from everyone under the spotlight, I faintly curved my lips and quickly stepped onto the stage to hand Draven a new external hard drive. Draven, this was just entrusted to me by the secretary to give to you. He said it's the backup materials. Orion didn't suspect it at all, and couldn't wait to save face. So the next moment, the transaction information of Draven bribing the captain appeared conspicuously on the screen. The background music was also replaced with the audio of Draven discussing with the airline's person in charge how to conceal the truth. Draven stared in disbelief, his eyes wide open, and he frantically rushed towards the control console. Turn it off quickly. Unfortunately, hadn't fulfilled me. The people around had already been transferred away by me, and Draven could only clumsily do it himself. But before he could unplug the power supply, the police had already broken in. Mr. Han, someone has reported you with their real name for illegally intercepting an aircraft and being suspected of a murder case. The evidence is conclusive. Please cooperate with the investigation and come with us. The crowd was in an uproar. And the camera flashes of the media were flickering wildly. This time, the Draven family could no longer cover it up for him. It's impossible. Who dares to report me? Draven struggled desperately and roared helplessly like a trapped beast, gracefully lifting my skirt. I bent down and whispered in his ear. Draven. It's me. How is it possible? Nebula. Why are you harming me? Looking at his crazy appearance, I answered irrelevant lie. Article 121 of the criminal law, whoever hijacks an aircraft by violence, coercion or other means shall be sentenced to fixed-term imprisonment of not less than 10 years or life imprisonment. If he causes serious injury, death or serious damage to the aircraft, he shall be sentenced to death. I didn't intend to tell Draven about the grudge related to my sister. Let him count his sins over and over again in prison, forever live in the shadow of being betrayed by the one he loved, and be tortured by the unknown fear forever. When making a statement, I went to visit Draven. After this incident, the old master Han directly announced to the public that Orion was the only heir of the group. He seemed to have aged 10 years. Many fine lines appeared at the corners of his eyes. And even his hair had turned a lot wider. The hacker also found a lot of other evidence of wrongdoing in his computer. Enough to make him never be able to make a comeback. Nebula. Did you ever love me? You must have loved me. Right? We almost had a child. His eyes were filled with pleading. And he stared at me persistently. Unwilling to give up, I was very satisfied with his current miserable state. So I smiled especially brightly. Draven. You know what? I was never pregnant at all. Siren didn't push me either. Oh right. I've already given those shares to Orion. Ignoring his desperate expression, I got up and left. A crazy roar came from behind me. And I thought it was extremely pleasant to hear. On the day Orion was sentenced, Siren died. In the early years, relying on Orion's status, she acted arrogantly in the entertainment industry. Now that she had lost the protection of capital, she was immediately retaliated against by countless people in the industry. After being bullied countless times, Siren suffered from depression. Originally, having fulfilled my obsession, she should have taken a good rest. But the Siren family quickly went bankrupt under Orion's suppression. So Siren had to act in a low-budget horror movie to make a living. But she didn't know that this movie was actually invested by Orion. I asked him to change the script to a hospital horror story, which was about a female star being haunted by a female ghost. On the day of the start of filming, I kindly went to give her flowers and, by the way, brought her the news that Draven had been sentenced to life imprisonment. Facing her venomous gaze, I smiled calmly. Do you know why I chose to report Draven? Because he killed my sister. Come to think of it, you're also one of the main culprits. Do you remember that Draven once intercepted an aircraft for you? You said you wanted him to prove his feelings. And he did it ostentatiously. But that aircraft was also carrying the transplanted organ from my sister. With just one of your unreasonable demands, my sister lost her life. I thought you were just a bit willful. But later, when you knew about this, what did you say? You said she deserved it, and that she wouldn't have lived long anyway. Her face changed suddenly. And her whole body began to tremble. You lied. What do you want to do? I shrugged infuriately and pointed to the rooftop set behind her. That's where my sister jumped off. The 18th floor. She fell and became a pool of blood and mud. The lighting at the scene was dim. And the eerie music played softly. The staff had all left work. And after Siren shouted in a breakdown for a long time, she only heard her own echo. The hospital gown on the wall fluttered. Like a female ghost. She stepped back, holding the railing, and her face turned pale with tension. I pressed forward step by step. With a cold smile. The 18th floor is so high. So very high. Do you think that when she dreams at midnight, will she come to claim your life? I only just found out that there's so much blood in a person's body. It was all over the ground. So red. Siren's face turned as pale as paper. And she was so frightened that she collapsed to the ground. Later on, I heard that when she was filming on the rooftop at midnight, she was in a trance and fell off. The people in the film crew said that before Siren died, she was shouting "Ghost" in a crazy state. And then she accidentally stepped into thin air in a panic. Netizens means one after another speculated that Siren had a guilty conscience because she had done too many bad things. And in the end, she reaped what she had sown. After browsing through the obituary in the entertainment section, I got up and threw the blue and white striped dress in the closet into the trash can. Looking at the gray sky outside the window, I dialed the phone. I'll trouble you to take good care of the village chief's family and my father. I'll transfer the gratitude fee to your card on time. Sure. Don't worry. The gangster smiled obsequiously and quickly sent over photos of several people with bruised faces. After thinking for a while, I added, they're probably short of money now. You might as well introduce them to some ways to make money quickly. The group of debt collectors in the small county town were particularly fierce. It was quite common for them to break someone's hands or feet. Understood. Sister. I personally sent the people who hurt you down here to apologize to you. The nerves that had been tightly stretched all these years suddenly relaxed, and I went to a bar and got dead drunk. Tears welled up uncontrollably. And I was crying and laughing at the same time. It's finally all over. But I didn't seem to be that happy either. Because my sister would never come back. Through my teary eyes, I saw Orion appear beside me with a solemn face. Nebula. You didn't answer my calls or reply to my messages. Do you know how long I've been looking for you? My brain was dulled by the stimulation of alcohol and emotions. I reached out and patted his face, muttering in dissatisfaction. Good-looking guy. Give me a smile. I was vaguely thinking that this male model was of really good quality. Seemingly amused by my words, Orion grabbed my wrist. You've got some nerve. What are you talking about? You have to smile when I tell you to smile. I unreasonably took out a card and threw it at him, frowning in anger. Orion picked up the black card slowly, and his tone carried a hint of danger. Nebula. Is this how you usually spend my money to pick up men? His cold and stern aura made me freeze for a moment. And I mumbled, realizing it only later. Who are you? Who am I? Orion sneered and asked rhetorically. He took my bag with one hand and picked me up directly with the other. The sudden movement made my stomach churn. I grabbed his collar and, without any warning, vomited. Yes, heaven fulfill Ryan's session. I vomited all over him. The assistant beside us let out a series of screams and hurriedly rummaged through the car for spare clothes. After all, Orion had a serious case of means cleanliness obsession. Once, an intern's hand shook, and coffee spilled on Orion's shoes. The intern was fired on the same day. What's all the noise about? Orion pinched the bridge of his nose and gave the assistant an irritated glance. Huh? The assistant didn't understand and thought it was the calm before the storm. Can't you see that she's scared by you? Assistant, you're right, sir. In the second half of the night, after I was fed some hangover soup, my sanity gradually returned. Looking at Orion with a gloomy face beside me, I gave an embarrassed smile. Embarrassing memories flashed through my mind frame by frame, and I was so ashamed and indignant that I felt like dying. On the way back, we passed a barbecue stall. When I smelled the fragrance, I stubbornly dragged Orion out of the car. Orion helplessly coaxed me for a long time. But in the end, he had no choice but to give in to a drunk person. So Orion, who had never eaten at a roadside dirty stall before, sat on a small stool under my coercion. Orion, dressed in a suit, bent his long legs and sterilized the bowls and chopsticks for me. I ate until oil was running down my mouth and even let out a really loud burp. After this incident, the distance between Orion and me became inexplicably closer. He would take me to attend cocktail parties, teach me how to make reports personally, and even replace all my colleagues with girls. I felt confused and questioned him about why he suddenly intervened in the members of my project team. During that time, I was working overtime in the company day and night and hardly talked to Orion. Orion looked at me deeply, his gaze straightforward and bare. Nebula. I can get jealous too. At that moment, my heart shamefully started beating faster. Perhaps after walking alone for too long, I inevitably became attached to the feeling of being cared about. I played the role of a lover dutifully, but he seemed to be constantly giving me more hints of crossing the line invisibly. On my birthday, Orion was on a business trip in Europe. The original itinerary was for a week, but he came back in a hurry at 12 o'clock at night. Orion looked at the clock on the wall and smiled at me. Nebula. Luckily I'm not late. I was surprised that he remembered my birthday. And even more surprised that he would postpone his work for me. That night, Orion booked all the fireworks in Beijing City for me. Looking at the brilliant fireworks in the sky, I unconsciously had tears in my eyes. Orion gently kissed away the tears at the corners of my eyes, treating me like a treasure. Nebula, I will always be willing to let you step on my shoulders and move forward. He didn't say any clingy love words. But in my opinion, this was far more powerful than, I love you. So I smiled extremely freely. Because I knew that Orion was really interested in me. The next day, the front page headline was that the president of the Han Corporation had spent a fortune to celebrate his girlfriend's birthday. At that time, I was curled up in his arms and scrolling through my phone. When I saw this news, my fingertips paused slightly. Orion, should we ask the public relations department to remove this piece of gossip? He had always cared about the company's image and had zero tolerance for unfounded entertainment gossip. But this time, Orion just smiled and focused on playing with my fingers. Why remove it? They didn't say anything wrong. Rubbing the word girlfriend on the screen, my cheeks felt a little hot. Orion seemed to really like seeing me embarrassed and annoyed because of him. In a good mood, he gave me a few more cooperation projects. When I received the admission notice from the Wharton School of Business, I was bored at home watching TV. The financial channel suddenly interrupted the program with a piece of news. Orion, the heir of the Han Corporation, has announced his wedding news. Looking at Orion's familiar profile on the screen, I knew it was time for me to leave. But that admission notice suddenly seemed a bit blinding. Originally, heading fulfilled weaponizing, Orion had promised me that once I successfully applied for postgraduate studies, he would accompany me to go abroad. He said he couldn't stand being too far away from me. Perhaps he really liked me when he said those words. But he would also hold kittens and puppies in his arms all the time when he liked them. Fortunately, having fulfilled my desire, I clearly understood that getting involved in a relationship could be costly. Otherwise, I would definitely be extremely sad now. When Orion opened the door, he smiled and glinted as before. I even had a momentary trance and suspected that the news I had just seen was just an illusion. Nebula, guess what I brought you? The SOUFFL from that store in the south of the city. When his eyes landed on the messy bedroom, his eyes dark and slightly. But in just a second, Orion returned to normal. My heart felt stuffy, as if I was going to suffocate the next second. I pretended to be calm and took the takeout box. Then said, "You're getting married? It's just a marriage of convenience. Nebula, you've always been smart. You surely understand the ins and outs of this." Orion loosened his tie, and his tone was relaxed as if he was just talking about the weather. Orion. I called his name softly, and the knuckles of my hand holding the glass turned slightly white from the force. What's wrong? Seemingly puzzled, Orion gently hugged me. I looked into his affectionate eyes, and my tone was full of pain as if I was in extreme agony. What about me? I covered my face, and my voice with a sobbing tone still betrayed my inner feelings. We will always be together. We will always be together. But he just won't marry me. He can wear $1 million haute couture outfit and accompany me to eat at a roadside dirty stall. He can cancel a transnational meeting and charter a plane to come back and celebrate my birthday. He can even tolerate me admitting the ambiguity between us in front of the camera, but he never thought of marrying me. Actually, this answer was reasonable and also within my expectations. With red eyes, my voice trembled. Obviously, by the time the Draven family passed to his generation, there was no need to rely on a marriage of convenience to stabilize his position. But he still wouldn't choose to marry me. Orion, you're so selfish. You want love but you're reluctant to give up your power and status. Orion smiled faintly for a moment. The way he looked at me was like looking at a naive child, and he asked rhetorically, if I didn't have my current status, would you still stay by my side? I had no way to refute his words. But it didn't stop me from creating a tough and broken image. So I smiled bitterly and gripped the handle of the suitcase in my hand tightly. Then, let out a low sigh. President Draven. Goodbye. Without hesitation. I took 2 steps back to distance myself from him. The change came suddenly. I left the villa wearing only a thin coat. The wine-red sleeves fluttered in the dim wind, making my heart feel especially empty. Orion's heart ached slightly. Almost imperceptibly. His tense back straight and then slightly slumped. I don't hold a grudge against his decision. On the contrary. I'm very grateful to him. If it weren't for Orion's connections, I wouldn't have been able to enjoy such high-quality educational resources. And it would have been harder for me to successfully apply for postgraduate studies. From the very beginning, my choice of him was only for the purpose of taking advantage. Now that I'm leaving, I naturally want to squeeze out the last bit of his value. Closing my eyes quickly, Orion didn't say anything to keep me. But I still felt his burning gaze. But I didn't look back either. Because just now, I was so sad, but it was all an act. Since the incident with Draven, I've been even more convinced that a man's guilt is sometimes more useful than love. Losing something after having it is more unforgettable than being together day and night. Extra chapter 6 years later. Nebula landed in City A again. The cabin door slowly opened. And she didn't expect to see Orion so soon. She was stunned for a moment. But still decided to give a hint that there were still lingering feelings. After all, Draven had secretly helped her a lot over the years. Nebula really liked this way of making a profit without any cost. It's rare that there's still a place for me beside President Draven. Orion just looked at her. And his tone was so familiar that it was as if they had never been apart. Yes. I've always kept a place for you. What kind of place? A place by your side. 6 years ago, Nebula applied for research and went abroad alone to pursue further studies for 8 years. She can be regarded as a dark horse in the business world. Over the years, she has achieved great success in her career and also invested a large amount in the women's education cause in backward areas. In the early years, Nebula got to know many entrepreneurs while being the Orion side. These connections made her more at ease when she was navigating the business world. One girls' school after another was built in the countryside. And one enterprise after another expanded its business territory. Nebula became a famous philanthropist and entrepreneur. In 6 years, Nebula didn't make a single phone call to Draven. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. But precisely because of this, the longing grew wildly in Draven's heart, wrapping his heart so tightly that not a breath of air could get through. Perhaps because the loss was too complete, Draven realized that Nebula was special to him. Long time no see. President Draven. Nebula curved her lips and made a gesture of shaking hands. Orion was not satisfied with this. He pulled her a little harder and hugged her into his arms. Looking at her flustered appearance, Orion laughed softly. Welcome home, Mrs. Hahn. Raising her eyebrows slightly, Nebula slowly held Orion's arm and created a certain distance from him. Mrs. Hahn? Yes. Can President Nebula give me a chance? Then I'll think about it. Nebula quickly calculated the liquid funds of the Hahn Corporation in her mind. She suddenly thought that the long tail effect of the breakup scene she invested in 6 years ago was really good. Since Draven was so proactive, Nebula decided to make another profit from him. Coincidentally, she was in need of a patsy to underwrite her poverty alleviation project for rural women. So she wiped away the tears that didn't actually exist and spoke softly. Draven hadn't fulfilled my sorry. I miss you so much. The end of the full text.